How to catch plankton eaters, silver carp and bighead. Plankton eater fishes originate from remote parts of East Asia and were only brought to Europe and to several other countries worldwide half a century ago. Actually, it's two species, namely the silver carp and the bighead. They are rather special fishes in many senses. Unlike all large-sized species native in Europe, they grow large and can yet only feed on quite small creatures, namely planktons. They also greatly differ in form. One quite characteristic feature is their eyes, which are in the case of both species situated rather low. What makes these two species different from each other is that whilst the bighead has a hard edge only between their anus and the fins on their belly, silver carps have this hard edge all along the belly. The shape of the bighead is rather robust, with a thick body. This fish has marble-like coloration covering the whole body. Its fins are very strong, with the two remarkably long and thick front fins, which actually spread out as far as where the belly fins are located. Its head is unusually big, very wide, and taking up quite a huge proportion of the whole body weight. Its broad body becomes narrow right towards the tail. These kinds of carps can move their rather small eyes in all directions. This is the silver carp, whose features are quite unlike that of the bighead. It's pure white, with strongly reflective small-sized silvery scales. Its head is proportionately much smaller than that of the bighead, and its entire body is quite flat, thin, almost like that of an asp. Its fins aren't big. Bighead carps mainly feed on zooplankton, while silver carps feed on phytoplankton. Their gills are also different. Since both species are incapable of eating bites as big as live hook baits, they have up until now been considered as fish that cannot ordinarily be caught with a hook. However, fishermen are inventive and could not come to terms with this, so finally there came one who had been experimenting until he managed to come up with the right fishing method. I had for a long time been thinking about how to catch fish, like the silver carp, with extraordinary eating habits by using regular fishing methods. I elaborate on the method in detail in my book titled How to Catch Plankton Eaters. Those who open this little book will be surprised to see just how witty and yet simple the regular method of fishing for plankton eater fish is. The author provides an overall knowledge of the most important information. He introduces all necessary fishing tackle for a fishing trip, as well as the methods of bottom fishing and fishing with a float. You can even learn by reading this book how to catch plankton eaters, as well as what to do, with what, when and how. The core of this method is technoplankton, which is a kind of dry pressed bait which, by slowly dissolving in the water, becomes something very much like a real plankton cloud. It comes in a variety of flavors and is produced to be bait for other fishes as well. Plankton eaters prefer the taste original, as well as flavors such as raspberry, vanilla, blood and honey. The method also makes use of the hook tree, which can have 1, 2 or 3 hooks on it. You also need hooks knotted on braided line leader, smaller ones for bottom fishing, bigger ones for fishing with a float. You also need a snap swivel, leader fixing and stoppers, as well as beads for the main line, a small plastic tube, Techno Puffy, and a fishing float, which are partly needed for the bottom fishing method, partly for fishing with a float. Keep in mind that silver carps and bigheads are rather strong and wide fighters, thus we should use a strong 3-meter long high-quality rod, as well as a robust and reliable reel with good drag system, with a long enough mono line, the diameter 0.3 millimeters at least. And we must always have a gaff with us. First, let's take a look at the equipment used in bottom fishing, and also with a hook tree suitable for a number of hooks because it is a more complicated rig. Use braided lines for leaders because its softness makes them suitable for plankton eaters, and attach them to the rings of the hook tree. Push technoplankton onto the tail of the hook tree. It will be quite tight-fitting because the tail-like part is made in such a way that it would get tight so that it will not slip off, neither when thrown nor when in the water. Then the snap swivel must be attached to the ring at the end of the hook tree, whilst another leader must be tied to the tail-like part, onto which a plastic pipe must be attached together with a leader fixing. Bait up each hook with Techno Puffy. Keep the points of the hooks naked. With a transparent rubber tube we must fix the third leader to the hook tree, then arrange them nicely together with the leader fixing, with which you can easily join it to the main line. To the snap swivel we must attach a heavy flat sinker with an eye. This is what a full 3-hook rig looks like. When the rig fixing is joined to the loop knotted at the end of the main line, the lead is situated at the end of the rig. If you are a real sportsman, use a 1-hook plankton eater rig with a plastic peg, giving the fish a bigger chance. The plastic peg has only one eye, so you can join the hook leader, the sinker and the main line there. In Hungary, you can buy this special tackle in most fishing shops. There is especially great demand for this tackle in such places where nearby you can find highly rated lakes and rivers with plankton eaters in them. In shops you needn't buy this tackle piece by piece. They are available in completely assembled rigs which practically need to be attached to the main line, and you can start fishing right away. Techno Puffy comes in 4 different sizes. We can choose the right size Techno Puffy that can lift the hook into the proper position. Once everything is arranged, we can start bottom fishing for plankton eaters. When using large size or heavyweight hooks, we can bait up more than just one Techno Puffy. The same goes for small size Techno Puffy. Now let's take a look at what happens at the bottom of the river or lake after casting. Once technoplankton reaches the water, its surface becomes loose and thousands of small particles start to peel off. These particles are exceedingly delicate and keep moving around in the water exactly like real planktons do. In reality, this process is much slower, since technoplankton comes apart more slowly than during this display. Techno Puffy keeps the hooks in an upward position, the tip pointing downwards. Plankton eaters, while slurping these pleasantly flavored plankton imitations, will also slurp in the hooks together with them. Just think about what exactly happens when the fish strikes. Plankton eaters smell fragrances coming from the technoplankton and can most likely sense or even see particles whirling in a cloud, which to them will exactly look like millions of planktons moving around in the water. They will swim closer instinctively, basically swim on the very spot where the particles swirl in greatest proximity, and by sucking in the water, they will filter out the edible particles. Since our hook lifted up with Techno Puffy will suspend weightlessly in the water, plankton eaters will also suck it into their mouth. The process is also aided by the fact that our hook leader is made from a light braided line which can move towards the sucking mouth with no resistance. Plankton eaters will try to spit out the Techno Puffy and the hook as something inedible, but obviously with no success, because the hook will get stuck in their mouth. When the tip of the hook penetrates, the fish will try to pull away as it senses the danger. Noticing the movement of the fishing line signaling this, the angler will grab the rod and start the fight.
Ha már eleve megakadt a horog hegye, akkor meg ugye a húzás rögtön határozottan jelentkezik, ahogyan a busa megmozdul a szúrás érzékelésekor. Ilyenkor meg ugye természetes, hogy a horgász az aktív húzásra bevág. Szó ami szó, a busákban nagy valószínűséggel megakad a horgász horga, és kezdődhet a tánc.
Plankton eaters do not give up easily. By nature, they are a wild and strong species, willing to escape and often behave rhapsodically. As we could see, this fish was already almost within the landing net, but once it noticed it, picking up strength, it swiftly swam away. Here we can observe the hook tree with the leftover technoplankton in the fish's mouth and that it got stuck in the lower lip. The basic tackle for catching plankton eaters typically varies according to the angler's personal experience and taste. In the case of this individually created rig, for instance, the hook leader is supported with a piece of latex tube. This fish weighs more than 8 kilos. Let's consider the question of fair play angling for a while. If we go for any type of fish, we allure the fish, may they be predator or non-predator species. We offer them something, taking advantage of their being unsuspicious. May it be live bait or a fishing lure, what matters is that it gets in the fish's mouth, where our hook then will get stuck, which is our overall aim anyway. If the fish knew about the hook being there, they would never attempt to swallow our bait. What is important for us is not what the fish wants, but the fact that we manage to make the fish do what we want.
Nem az a lényeg számunkra, hogy a hal mit is akar tulajdonképpen, hanem az, hogy mi nem erőszakkal juttattuk horgunkat a hal testébe, illetve a szájába.
When landing the fish with a gaff, we must be rather careful and keep active contact with the fish because due to a not good enough attempt, a wild and sudden jump of the fish can lead to the breaking of the line.
Mert például egy ilyen jónak nem mondható próbálkozás után a vad megugrás könnyen
The question is what to use, a landing net or a gaff. Plankton eaters as heavy as 6 to 8 kilos can still be landed with a large and deep landing nets, yet it is physically impossible in the case of larger fish, which won't fit in the net.
Még kiszedhetők nagy és mély merítőszákokkal is, de a nagyobb halaknál ez már fizikailag sem nagyon lehetséges, hiszen szinte nem is férnek bele a merítőbe.
In any case, once the fish gets into the net, it is highly recommended to take it farther from the edge of the water, so that for instance such pictures could be taken of fish on a stringer, each heavier than 8 kilos. A great number of plankton eaters are inhabited in rivers as well, so no wonder that so many anglers are preparing their rigs for plankton eaters on riverbanks.
A folyóvizekben is sok busa találta meg az élet terét. Nem csoda hát, ha ezek partjain is szorgalmasan szerelnek busára a horgászok.
What the basic equipment consists of is described in detail in the book How to Catch Plankton Eaters.
Az alapeszközök, a felszerelés maga a Busalász című könyvben leírtakkal ez esetben is teljesen megegyező.
There are certain signs that inform us about the presence of plankton eaters in the water. The usual rhythmic movement of the water is disturbed by V-shaped waves indicating fish right under the surface, or all of a sudden many twirls appear on the surface. Then we can be sure of their presence underneath. If the fish swim nearer the bottom, numberless small bubbles will sparkle on a large part of the surface, which will give the fish away.
Ha lennúsznak, akkor a számtalan, nagy területről felszálló apró buborék lehet jelzésértékű.
If fighting the fish goes sufficiently, despite their wideness, plankton eaters will give up and will lie up on the surface. A persistent fight will make the fish surrender sooner or later. You can see in the picture that the hook is penetrating through the lower lip of the fish. When bottom fishing, it's almost always the case that the lower lip is hooked. Remember that under the water the point of the hook, which is held upwards with Techno Fishing, is pointing down, so when the plankton eater sucks it in, it will constantly be pointing downwards due to the hook leader. That is why the lower lip is hooked. When the fish is hooked, The hook will most probably remain in this position, and in the case of bottom fishing, it will pierce through the hard, bony lower lip.
A helyzet csak véletlenül változhat meg, tehát fenekezésnél a kemény, csontos alsó állkapocsba kerül majd a horog.
Landing the fish with bare hands can be very dangerous, since due to the erratic movements of the fish, the hook can easily end up piercing your own hand. So it is highly unrecommended. In the case of plankton eaters heavier than 2-3 kilos, you must make sure that you have a gaff or a landing net with you. If, having no other alternatives, you have to use your own hands, take the fish out holding it by the mouth, but only when it is absolutely exhausted. Only experienced anglers should attempt at taking the fish out this way, who know exactly where and how the mouth of the fish should be grabbed. You must also know when using a gaff where you can find soft and hard parts of the mouth. If the hook happens to pierce through a hard part, you should not carelessly increase the pain of the fish. It is also not sure whether the hook can slip to a softer part of the mouth and penetrate it sufficiently. In these pictures, we can observe how the seemingly exhausted fish can recover its strength again. When most unexpected, the fish can, with its elemental power, emerge from the water and almost run on the surface. This unusual feature of plankton eaters has many times led to broken lines. The elemental strength that causes such erratic action does obviously not last for long. However, you must always be careful. Here we can see that this rather experienced angler is looking for where to grab the fish in the mouth when the fish, gaining some strength, almost tears itself out of the man's hands. It happens many times that at the same time there are two fish hooked when anglers are fishing next to each other. You must be very careful in such situations not to entangle the lines and give the fish a chance to outmaneuver you. The question is whether these relative newcomers in our waters have already become popular with anglers. The popularity of plankton eaters has grown all over the world now, not only in fish farming, but among anglers as well. Its meat is especially beneficial for us because the unsaturated fatty acids in its meat can contribute to the cholesterol level and thus help prevent certain diseases. It is also worthy of note that it is excellent material for a number of dishes with exquisite seasoning that you can prepare at home, as well as sufficient for producing tin food, fish cakes and fish balls. Mind a háztartásokban, mind pedig a konzervekben, halpogátságban, fasírtok formájában. Indeed, yet not all parts of plankton eaters have good taste. You must know which parts should not be used for cooking. Now we'll show you how, in our opinion, plankton eaters must be cleaned and what parts should be thrown away. The fish must first be killed. You must start cutting it up on the back. Freshly killed, its nerves will keep on reacting to the cuts, their fins and tail will go on moving, like in the case of any other fish species. The knife should go along the spiny fin down to the tail, and you must cut deep down to the spine. Then we must cut into their side behind the head, being careful about not damaging their inner organs. Disemboweling can now easily be done by turning the belly towards us. After disemboweling, the meat on the back can be taken off the body. The thick piece of meat can gently be cut off the spine right up to the ribs. When doing this procedure, we must try to take this chunk off in one piece, without wasting or cutting it unnecessarily up into small bits. Therefore, we must use a knife of excellent quality. Filleting knives are the best tool possible. They will delicately respond to the movements of your hand, cutting exactly where and as much as you intend to, so you can prevent wasting and the processing will be just perfect. You should not cut a layer of fat located both on the back and on the belly together with the precious meaty part. And here is the most valuable part of the fish for us, or better to say one part of it, which needs further processing. Turning it upside down, the thick layer of muscles on the other side should also be taken off as we have done before. Having cut off the other side, we are almost done with removing the important parts of the fish. Many also keep the head, which after a thorough wash and cleaning can be used for the fish soup. The large, thick chunks of meat should be cut into two alongside the angle of the muscles. Then with a filleting knife, the thick skin must carefully be taken off the meat. We must make sure not to cut the skin, because it will be difficult to carry on.
Most már csak annak a kellemetlen ízű vörös izomrétegnek az eltávolítása van hátra, amely a rossz ízt adná az ételnek.
Now only the red part of muscles with the unpleasant taste is left to remove, which should otherwise spoil the dish. Due to its distinct red color, it is easy to distinguish. With a sharp knife, it will come off with no difficulty. Here is an illustration from the How to Catch Plankton Eaters, which precisely shows which parts are of no value for us, and the right-hand picture shows the part which is of the highest worth for a great number of dishes. In our rivers and lakes, you can meet plankton eaters in two ways. It is either you to find them, or them to find you. You can efficiently feed plankton eaters as well. There is namely a special feeding material that will attract plankton eaters and will make them stay. This special cloud-like ground bait must first be turned into a wet substance and mixed well.
Jól kenődő masszává vizezzük fel, és jól keverjük el.
When in water, the particles will shape up into a cloud and will look like a plankton cloud. According to our experience, it effectively deceives plankton eaters and attracts them there. When this material is completely turned into fluid, with a special gun you will be able to get it to the place where you exactly want it, up to 15 meters from where you are.
Akár 15 méter távolságra is.
Carefully sucking the material into the tube, you will be able to spurt it out wherever you want to.
Egy helyre tudjuk spriccelni azt.
When in water, the particles will shape up into a cloud and will look like a plankton cloud. According to our experience, it effectively deceives plankton eaters and attracts them there. Feeding can be efficient anywhere, but it is most efficient on lakes which floats, where the feeding stocks will not float away. Mixing the ground bait with a special heavy material, it will sink well under the surface and the cloud will only take shape in the deep or at the bottom. The method of fishing for plankton eaters with floats is also rather interesting, and different kinds of floats can be applied. Nevertheless, we mainly use two distinct types. The scale float only needs a small piece of lead so that it will make it stand in the water, and the rest of the necessary weight will come from technoplankton on the hook tree.
A többi súlyt a busafára felhelyezett technoplankton adja. Alkalmazhatunk két horgos busafát.
We should also apply a hook tree with two hooks. The rig is quite easy to prepare. Apart from the float, you will need a hook tree, technoplankton, hooks attached to the hook leader, a small piece of lead as well as a rod and a reel. Before throwing, the two hooks should be pierced into the bottom part of the technoplankton so that the braided hook links won't get entangled.
Nézzük meg, hogy ez esetben mi történik a víz alatt. A technoplankton most is ázni kezd. A szemcsék ezrei most is leválnak róla, és
let's see what happens after that in the water. The technoplankton will start getting soaked, thousands of particles peel off and start delicately fall downwards. The two hooks pierced into the bottom soon get loose and settle on the hook leader. When using floats, the hooks will get into the thickest stream of the technoplankton cloud. When the fish looking for food get near the hooks and search for the thickest stream of the technoplankton, they will undoubtedly find the hooks and suck them in unsuspectingly. Now let's see an experiment how the scale float works. The small lead with the technoplankton will pull down the float as deep as the black mark is in the water. As the melting proceeds, there is less and less of the pressed bait and is therefore losing some of its mass, making the float move upwards gradually as the technoplankton runs out.
Mindig egyre feljebb jön, éppen úgy, ahogyan a tabletta fogy.
When there is no technoplankton left, the float is out of the water and the black mark is completely visible. The white mark will also be visible in a short while. When the white mark is visible, it signals for us that there is very little left of the technoplankton, and when it runs out, the white mark will be completely visible. This float shows us the amount of technoplankton as easy as that, and informs us when a new technoplankton is needed to be placed on the hook tree. When fishing for plankton eaters, we can use both sliding floats and fixed ones, but since we usually float for plankton eaters in the upper layers of the water, fixed depth floats are more practical since we use a relatively small depth compared to the rod. As we said before, plankton eaters are almost always ready to recover their strength and surprise us most unexpectedly. They only sometimes get exhausted as easily as this approximately 3 kilo fish. When we hook the fish a bit further from the edge of the water and there are no obstacles in the water, we should try to exhaust the fish when it is still far from the bank, since near the edge there may be all kinds of obstacles where the fishing line can get entangled. This will especially be problematic for us if we have a hook tree with 2 hooks, since the second free hook can easily get caught in water reed or anything.
Az úszós horgászatban az eseteknek szinte a 100%-ában viszont a felső puhajakban akad meg.
In the case of fishing with floats, the hook will most likely penetrate the upper soft lip. It is almost obvious, since when applying technoplankton, our hooks are hanging in the water with a point upwards. We pull the line with an upward movement, and the hooks pointing upwards will naturally penetrate through the upper lip. In the case of this fish, you can see the hook in the upper lip.
Ennél a busánál is jól látni, hogy a horog a felső szájszélben ült meg.
It is also worth fishing with floats on rivers as well, although the particular features of the water will influence our results to a greater extent than that of still waters. The current of the river will make the hooks float out of the cloudy bait. It is, however, no big deal, and we should not worry, because the fish will sooner or later try to find the dissolving parts of the cloud and will try again to swim into the thickest spot so that they can feed better. Thus, they will swim under our floats as well as under our hooks and the technoplankton, and then we'll catch a nice fish like this.
És akkor egy ilyen szép busa lehet az eredmény.
There is one more aspect that we will consider as regards fishing for plankton eaters. So far, anglers have caught their fish in the daylight. When day becomes night, during sunset a number of fish will be easy to catch, amongst them the plankton eaters. Despite the reddish light of the setting sun, darkness will gradually occupy the landscape. This, however, will not make plankton eaters less eager to bite.
A hal szájánál jól látható az elázott technoplankton maradékának fehér színe.
The white spot you can see on the fish's mouth is what has remained of technoplankton. At this time of the day, when details are hardly visible, the fish was probably attracted by the smells coming from the technoplankton rather than being able to see the cloud. And although the fish was hardly moving by the end of the fight, when it was landed we could see just how much energy it still had. The so-called night float is the other type that we can apply. Its antenna is a transparent plastic tube which also has a luminous inner tube. We need something to guide us in the dark, which goes without saying, as we all know what makes nighttime fishing hard.
De ezt nem is kell magyarázzuk, hiszen mindenki tapasztalta már az éjszakai horgászat nehézségeit.
This luminous little tube reliably informs us of all movements of the float, and there is nothing to do till there is no fish biting. Fighting the fish in the night is always a challenge because we have very little information of the fish on the hook in the beginning. When we can finally see the fish, then we can properly respond to the challenges of the fight.
megfogott és megtartani kívánt
Fish caught and kept are better killed right away or be kept on a stringer and should by no means be placed in a fish keeping net, because there they will most probably die of suffocation.
Elpusztulnak, megfulladnak.
Scientific results prove the angler's experience that plankton eaters feed at night just as they do during the day. In addition, real planktons gather together into greater proximity, mainly in upper layers of the water, which makes this particular spot a superb feeding area for plankton eaters. It is therefore worth going fishing for plankton eaters at night, and the fish, for technoplankton's sake, will sink deeper, which is perfectly proved by the fact that the inventor of this method is fighting a remarkable sized fish right now. This landing net proves to be small for this fish, therefore a gaff is needed to land the fish.
Elő is kerül a vágóhorog, amivel a halat sikerül is kivenni.
It is indeed an impressive size of a fish. Fellow anglers awake gather around to see it. This plankton eater caught at the bottom is 19 kilos. These fish have already adapted to the conditions of our country. There are many signs to prove that they spawn here and there, although there is no scientific proof of it yet. For the time being, we can only rely on the colonization procedures. The question is whether there will be new supplies until assumed spawning becomes more efficient. Some agricultural firms in Hungary have for years been dealing with multiplication of plankton eaters, mostly with that of silver carps and beakheads, among others. We have stocks of pure-blooded silver carps as well as beakheads. We have for years been breeding and selling young offspring, pre-bred offspring, young autumn fish as well as marketable right-sized fish for both eating and fishing purposes. In intensively maintained fishing lakes with professional colonization, plankton eaters do not become rivals for our native fishes in terms of their nutrition. These two types utilize the nutrition found in our waters and grow really large, much to the delight of the anglers.
A vizek táplálékait rendkívül jól hasznosítja, és hatalmas példányokká növekszenek vizeinkben a horgászok örömére.
Therefore, there is no need for sorrow. There are enough supplies of plankton eaters, and experiences show that they can grow as large as 60 kilos in our waters. Anglers can, with the help of this film, learn how to catch them in an orderly, fair sport fishing manner.